Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he walked down the dark hallway of Colony Station Zeta 7. The old mining station was always hot and humid. The air recycling system had not worked properly for months. Jake carried his toolbox in one hand and a small flashlight in the other. He was heading to the waste disposal area to fix another broken pipe. The station sat on the edge of known space, far from Earth and far from anywhere important. Most people who worked here were either running from something or had nowhere else to go. Jake was both. He had left Earth 5 years ago, after his wife died in a transport accident. The pain of losing her was too much to bear in the places they had shared together. Jake pushed open the heavy door to the waste disposal section. The smell hit him immediately. It was worse than usual. He covered his nose with his sleeve and stepped inside. The room was filled with old machinery and broken equipment. Pipes ran along the walls and ceiling, dripping strange colored liquids into collection tanks below. As Jake moved deeper into the room, he heard a soft sound. It was like breathing, but not quite human. He stopped and listened carefully. There it was again. Jake followed the sound to a corner where several large containers were stacked against the wall. Behind the containers, Jake found something that made him gasp. A creature lay curled up on the floor, barely moving. It was not human. The being was about the size of a person, but had pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Its limbs were longer and thinner than human arms and legs. What looked like scales covered parts of its body, and its face was narrow, with large, dark eyes that were now closed. The creature was clearly dying. Its skin had turned a sickly green color in several places, and Jake could see burns and wounds all over its body. The smell of toxic chemicals was strong around it. Jake realized the creature had been poisoned by the waste materials that leaked throughout this section. Jake knelt down beside the being. He had never seen anything like it before, but he knew suffering when he saw it. The creature's breathing was shallow and weak. Its large eyes opened slowly and looked at Jake with what seemed like fear and pain. "Hey there," Jake said softly. "I'm not going to hurt you." The creature made a sound that might have been words, but Jake could not understand them. The language was unlike anything he had ever heard. It sounded like music mixed with whispers. Jake looked around the room. How had this creature gotten here? The station was supposed to be for humans only. Very few alien species were allowed in this part of space. Then Jake remembered hearing some of the other workers talking about smugglers who sometimes used the station as a stopping point. They would hide illegal cargo in the waste areas where no one liked to go. This creature had probably been cargo. Someone had brought it here and then abandoned it when things got too dangerous. Jake felt anger rise in his chest. How could anyone leave a living being to die like this? The creature tried to sit up, but fell back down with a soft cry of pain. Jake could see that it was getting weaker. If he did nothing, it would be dead within hours. Jake made a decision that would change everything. He could not let this being die alone in this terrible place. He did not care what species it was or where it came from. It was hurt and needed help. "I'm going to get you out of here," Jake said, even though he knew the creature probably could not understand him. Jake ran back to his quarters and grabbed some old blankets and a medical kit. He also took some of his water and food supplies. When he returned to the waste disposal area, the creature was unconscious, but still breathing. Very carefully, Jake wrapped the creature in blankets and lifted it. It was lighter than he expected, but still awkward to carry. Jake struggled to get it through the narrow corridors without being seen. Most of the station workers were sleeping during this shift, which made it easier. Jake's quarters were small but private. He had a bed, a small desk, a storage unit, and his own bathroom. It was not much, but it was clean and safe. Jake placed the creature on his bed and began to examine its injuries more closely. The burns looked like they came from acid or some other corrosive chemical. The creature's skin was damaged in many places, and some of the wounds were infected. Jake had basic medical training from his time working on different stations, but he had never treated an alien before. Jakes started by cleaning the wounds with water and antiseptic from his medical kit. The creature woke up several times during the process and made soft sounds of pain, but it did not fight him. Jake thought it might understand that he was trying to help. Over the next few hours, Jake worked carefully to treat each injury. He used bandages and healing gel on the worst wounds. He gave the creature small amounts of water, which it seemed to accept gratefully. Jake was not sure if human food would be safe for it, so he started with just water. The creature's breathing became stronger as the night went on. Its skin began to return to a more normal blue color. Jake felt hope growing in his chest. Maybe this being would survive. After all, Jake did not sleep that night. He stayed awake, watching over his unexpected patient. He wondered what would happen when the creature was strong enough to communicate. Would it be afraid of him? Would it want to leave right away? As the station's artificial morning began, Jake realized that his life had just become much more complicated. He was harboring an alien in his quarters, which was against all station rules. If anyone found out, he would be fired and probably arrested. But looking at the creature sleeping peacefully on his bed, Jake knew he had made the right choice. Some things were more important than rules. 23 years had passed since Jake Morrison found the dying alien in the waste disposal area. Jake was now 68 years old and lived in a small house on the outskirts of New Denver on Earth. His hair was gray and his hands were wrinkled, but his eyes still held the same kindness that had saved a stranger's life so long ago. Jake spent his days tending to his garden and playing with his granddaughter, Lucy. She was 7 years old and full of energy. Jake would tell her stories about his time working on the distant space stations, though he never mentioned the alien he had saved. That was a secret he kept to himself. The galaxy had changed dramatically since Jake's days on Colony Station Zeta 7. Humanity had spread to hundreds of worlds, claiming planets and resources with aggressive determination. The Terran Colonial Authority, led by Director Lisa Grant, had built a massive military force to protect human interests. Many alien species had begun to fear and resent humanity's rapid expansion. Jake watched the news broadcasts with growing concern. Every day brought reports of new conflicts between humans and alien civilizations. Trade wars, territorial disputes, and diplomatic failures filled the headlines. Jake remembered a time when space seemed full of wonder and possibility. Now it felt like a place of constant tension and fear, far across the galaxy on the homeworld. Of the Kithara, another being also watched the news with interest. Velther had grown from a young refugee into one of the most respected members of the Kithara Collective Council. His pale blue skin now bore the intricate tattoos that marked his high rank, and his once fearful eyes had become wise and thoughtful. Velther had never forgotten the human who saved his life. Jake Morrison's face remained clear in his memory, along with every act of kindness the human had shown him. For 23 years, Velther had honored that debt in small ways. When the council debated trade agreements with human colonies, Velther always spoke in favor of fair terms. When territorial disputes arose, he pushed for peaceful solutions that favored human settlers. The Kithara were known throughout the galaxy for their advanced technology and peaceful nature. They had mastered faster-than-light travel long before humans discovered fire. Their ships could cross the galaxy in days, and their weapons could destroy entire fleets. But the Kithara preferred diplomacy to war, trade to conquest. Velther's influence had helped humanity in ways that Jake could never have imagined. Mining rights that should have gone to other species were quietly transferred to human companies. Diplomatic immunity that protected human traders in dangerous sectors. Research data that helped human scientists develop better technology. All of these benefits came from Velthur's careful work behind the scenes. But now something was happening that even Velthur's influence might not be able to stop. Reports were coming in from across the galaxy about a new alliance forming. Dozens of alien species were joining together under a single banner. They called themselves the Purge Coalition, and their goal was simple: remove humanity from the galaxy permanently. The coalition's leaders argued that humans were too aggressive, too greedy, and too dangerous to be allowed to continue their expansion. They pointed to destroyed ecosystems on conquered worlds, broken treaties, and the growing human military as proof that humanity would eventually threaten all other forms of life. Velthur sat in his private chambers, reviewing intelligence reports about the coalition's activities. The alliance was larger and more organized than anything the galaxy had seen before. They had been planning this for years, building weapons and gathering support in secret. When they struck, it would be with overwhelming force. The Cathara Collective Council had been debating how to respond to this crisis for weeks. Most members favored maintaining neutrality, as was their traditional policy. The Cathara had survived for millennia by avoiding large-scale conflicts. They saw no reason to change now. Velthur had argued passionately for supporting humanity, but his fellow council members were skeptical. Why should the Cathara risk their own people for a species that most of them had never met? Humans had given them no special reason to deserve protection. The logic was sound from their perspective, but it ignored the debt that Velthur carried in his heart. During one particularly heated council session, Velthur's closest friend and colleague, Zaralin, confronted him directly. "You speak of humans as if they are our allies," she said, her voice carrying the musical tones of their language. "But they are not. They are strangers who have caused more destruction in the galaxy than any species in recent memory. Why do you defend them so strongly?" Velthur had never told anyone about Jake Morrison. The story seemed too personal, too unlikely to be believed. How could he explain that his entire perspective on humanity came from the kindness of one maintenance worker on a forgotten mining station? "I have seen what humans are capable of," Velthur replied carefully. "Not all of them are driven by greed or aggression. Some of them possess a compassion that rivals our own." Zaralin's expression showed doubt. "Even if that is true, why should we risk our civilization for theirs? The Coalition's forces are vast. If we stand with humanity, we may be destroyed alongside them." Velthur had no answer that would satisfy the Council. He could not reveal the personal nature of his connection to humanity without seeming biased and emotional. But he also could not abandon the people of Jake Morrison's species to face extinction alone. As the council sessions continued, disturbing reports began arriving from the outer rim of the galaxy. The Purge Coalition had begun its campaign. Human colonies were being attacked without warning. Entire worlds were being evacuated or destroyed. The human military was fighting back, but they were vastly outnumbered. Velthur watched the casualty reports with growing horror. Images of burning cities and fleeing refugees filled the communication channels. Among the faces of the scared and desperate humans, Velthur kept seeing Jake Morrison's kind eyes and gentle smile. The Cathara Council finally reached a decision. They would remain neutral in the conflict, offering humanitarian aid to all sides, but military support to none. It was a practical choice that would keep their people safe, but it felt like a betrayal to Velthur. After the council session ended, Velthur returned to his chambers and pulled out a small object from a secure container. It was a simple metal tool that Jake had given him as a farewell gift 23 years ago. The tool was nothing special, just a small wrench that Jake had used in his daily work. But to Velthar, it represented everything good about humanity. Jake had given him. The tool with a smile, saying that every being should have something to help them fix what was broken. At the time, Velthar thought Jake was talking about mechanical repairs. Now he understood the deeper meaning. Some things in the galaxy were broken, and they needed to be fixed. The growing hatred between species, the cycle of violence and revenge, the fear that was driving entire civilizations to make terrible choices. Jake had shown Velthar that one person could make a difference, that a single act of kindness could ripple outward in ways that changed everything. Velthar made a decision that would define the rest of his life. He would find a way to honor his debt to Jake Morrison, even if it meant defying his own people. The human who had saved his life deserved nothing less than Velthar's complete loyalty. The galaxy was about to learn that some debts could never be forgotten. The first wave of attacks came without warning. Admiral Chris Walker stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Valiant, watching in horror as red dots appeared across the tactical display. Each dot represented a human colony under attack. Within 6 hours, 27 worlds had gone silent. "Sir, we're receiving emergency broadcasts from the Kepler system," reported Lieutenant Ben Hayes, his voice tense with fear. "The Coalition fleet is 3 times larger than our intelligence predicted." Chris Walker was a veteran of many conflicts, but he had never seen anything like this. The Purge Coalition had coordinated simultaneous attacks across hundreds of light years of space. Their planning was perfect, their execution flawless. Human defense forces were being overwhelmed before they could even respond. "How many ships are we looking at?" Walker asked. "At least 10,000 confirmed, sir. Possibly more. They're hitting our outer colonies first, then moving inward toward the core systems." Walker felt his stomach drop. The entire human fleet numbered only 3,000 ships, and they were scattered across the galaxy, protecting different sectors. The Coalition outnumbered them more than 3 to 1, and they were fighting together while humanity's forces were divided. The communication system crackled to life. Director Lisa Grant's voice filled the bridge, speaking to every human ship in the fleet simultaneously. "All forces, this is Director Grant. We are under coordinated attack by hostile alien forces. All ships are to converge on the Sol system immediately. Earth's defense is our highest priority. Repeat, all ships return to Earth now." Chris Walker knew what this meant. By pulling back to defend Earth, they were abandoning millions of humans on the outer colonies. It was a terrible choice, but it was the only way to save the species from complete extinction. "Set course for Earth, Maximo." "Speed," Walker ordered. "And send a message to all civilian transports in this sector. Tell them to run." Meanwhile, on the peaceful world of Kithara Prime, Velthar watched the unfolding destruction with growing desperation. The Coalition's attacks were more brutal than anyone had expected. They were not just conquering human worlds. They were destroying them completely. Velthar had requested another emergency council session, but his colleagues were unmoved by the human suffering. The Kithara had maintained their neutrality policy for thousands of years, and they would not change it now. "The humans brought this upon themselves," said Council Elder Mordain, his ancient voice carrying the weight of centuries. "They expanded too quickly, made too many enemies. This is the natural consequence of their aggressive behavior." "But they are being exterminated," Velthar protested. "Entire populations are being wiped out. Children, families, innocent people who never harmed anyone." "The galaxy is cruel," replied Zarelin sadly. "We cannot save every species that faces extinction. Our first duty is to our own people." Velthar felt helpless as he watched the reports coming in. The human colony on Proxima 7 had been completely destroyed. 2 million people dead. The mining stations in the Vega system had been captured. their workers killed or enslaved. The coalition was not just winning, they were proving that they meant to eliminate humanity entirely. Then came the news that changed everything. The Battle of Kepler Station had been humanity's last major stand in the Outer Rim. Admiral Walker had led a desperate defense against overwhelming odds. The humans had fought with incredible courage, but they were simply outnumbered too badly to win. What made Velther's heart break was not just the military defeat, but the footage that accompanied it. The coalition forces had targeted civilian evacuation ships as they fled the battle. Families with children, elderly people, refugees who had already lost everything. The coalition ships had hunted them down and destroyed them without mercy. Velther watched the recordings of human parents trying to shield their children as the evacuation ships were torn apart. He saw the fear in their eyes, the same fear he had felt when he was dying in that waste disposal room 23 years ago. The same fear that Jake Morrison had taken away with his kindness. The Cathara Council gathered to discuss sending humanitarian aid to help with civilian evacuations. It was a compromise that would allow them to help without getting involved in the actual fighting. Velther knew it was better than nothing, but it felt like too little, too late. "We will send a small fleet of medical ships," announced Council Elder Mordain. "They will assist with refugee evacuations only. No military involvement, no weapons, no engagement with coalition forces." Velther volunteered to lead the humanitarian mission. He told the council that his experience with other species made him the best choice for the job. In reality, he was hoping to find some way to do more than just watch humanity die. The Cathara humanitarian fleet consisted of only 12 ships, but they were equipped with the most advanced technology in the galaxy. They could travel faster than any human vessel, and their shields could protect them from most weapons. They were designed for rescue operations, not combat. As Velther's fleet approached the Sol system, he was shocked by what he saw. The space around Earth was filled with human ships, but they were badly damaged and outnumbered. Hundreds of coalition vessels were advancing toward the planet, their weapons charging for a final assault. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the human fleet," reported his communications officer. "They're warning us to stay away from the combat zone." Velther opened a channel to the human ships. "This is Commander Velther of the Cathara Collective. We are here to assist with civilian evacuations." The reply came from Admiral Walker himself. "Cathara vessel, we appreciate your offer, but this is a combat zone. We cannot guarantee your safety." "We understand the risks," Velther replied. "Our orders are to help with evacuations only." What Velther saw next would haunt him for the rest of his life. The coalition fleet began its final assault on Earth's defenses. The human ships fought with desperate courage, throwing themselves at the enemy vessels to buy time for the evacuation transports to escape. Velther watched a human destroyer ram itself into a coalition cruiser, sacrificing its entire crew to protect a transport full of refugees. He saw fighter pilots continue attacking even when their ships were crippled and burning. He witnessed acts of bravery and selflessness that rivaled anything in Cathara history. But what affected him most was seeing the civilian transports under attack. The coalition forces were deliberately targeting the defenseless evacuation ships, just as they had at Kepler Station. Men, women, and children were dying, while Velther's advanced ships watched from a safe distance. "Sir, a human transport is under attack," reported his weapons officer. "Coalition fighters are closing in on them." Velther watched the transport's desperate evasive maneuvers. Its shields were failing, its engines damaged. There were probably thousands of people on board, families trying to escape the destruction of their world. "Sir, we could easily drive off those fighters," the weapons officer said quietly. "Our ships are much more advanced than theirs." Velther thought of Jake Morrison, alone in his quarters, caring for a dying alien despite the risk. To himself, Jake had not asked for permission or worried about rules. He had simply done what was right. "Sir, the transport's shields are failing," the weapons officer reported urgently. Velther made a decision that would change the course of galactic history. He thought of the small metal tool Jake had given him, the symbol of fixing what was broken. The galaxy was broken, and it needed to be fixed. "All ships, this is Commander Velther," he announced over the fleet communication system. "We are going to defend those transports." "Sir, that's not our mission," his second-in-command protested. "The Council specifically ordered us to avoid combat." "The Council is not here," Velther replied firmly. "I am, and I will not watch innocent people die while I have the power to save them." The Kithara ships moved into attack formation, their advanced weapon systems coming online. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the peaceful Kithara were going to Wargot, and it was all because of a single act of kindness from a human named Jake Morrison. The moment Velther's ships opened fire, everything changed. The Coalition fighters attacking the human transport ship were destroyed in seconds. The Kithara weapons were far more advanced than anything the Coalition had faced before. Bright beams of energy cut through the enemy vessels like they were made of paper. Admiral Walker watched from the bridge of the Valiant in amazement. "What are those ships doing? I thought the Kithara were neutral." "Sir, we're getting a communication from the Kithara commander," reported Lieutenant Hayes. Velther's voice came over the speakers, calm but determined. "Human fleet, this is Commander Velther. We are here to help. Please coordinate your defensive efforts with our ships." Walker did not question the miracle that had just saved thousands of civilian lives. "All ships, form up with our new allies. Let's show these Coalition forces what we can do together." The 12 Kithara ships were small compared to the massive Coalition fleet, but their impact was immediate and devastating. Their shields could absorb incredible damage, and their weapons could destroy enemy ships with single shots. More importantly, they were fast enough to be wherever they were needed most. Captain Amy Rodriguez led a squadron of human fighters alongside the Kithara ships. She had never seen technology like this before. The alien vessels moved like they were dancing, flowing around enemy fire while delivering precise, deadly strikes. "These Kithara pilots are incredible," she radioed to her squadron. "Stay close to them and follow their lead." But even with the Kithara's help, the battle was far from over. The Coalition had brought a massive fleet to destroy Earth, and they were not going to give up easily. When they saw the Kithara ships in action, they changed their strategy. "All Coalition forces, priority target the alien ships," came the order from the Coalition commander. "Destroy them first, then finish the humans." The Coalition fleet began to concentrate their fire on Velther's ships. The Kithara vessels were powerful, but they were outnumbered hundreds to one. Their shields began to weaken under the massive assault. Velther realized that his small fleet alone could not turn the tide of battle. He needed help, but the Kithara Council had been clear about their neutrality policy. They would not send military support. "Sir, our shields are down to 60%, reported his weapons officer. "We cannot sustain this level of attack much longer." Velther made another decision that would defy his orders. He opened a communication channel to Kithara Prime, broadcasting on all frequencies so that every Kithara in the galaxy could hear him. "My people, this is Commander Velther speaking from the Sol System. I am about to tell you a story that I have never shared before. 23 years ago, I was dying on a human space station. I had been abandoned by smugglers and left to die. In toxic waste, no one would have found me. No one would have cared." The communication went out across the galaxy, reaching every Kithara ship, every Kithara world, every Kithara listening post. Even the council members on Cathara Prime stopped their debates to hear what their military commander was saying. But a human found me, Velther continued as his ship shook from enemy fire. A maintenance worker named Jake Morrison. He had no reason to help me. He gained nothing from saving my life. In fact, he risked his job and his safety to care for. And for weeks, he shared his food, his water, his shelter. He asked for nothing in return. On Cathara Prime, Council Elder Mordain listened with growing understanding. This explained why Velther had always favored humans in diplomatic matters. It explained his passionate defense of their species. Jake Morrison showed me that humans are capable of incredible kindness. Velther's voice continued. He taught me that compassion can exist between strangers, between different species, between beings who have nothing in common except the desire to help each other. The battle raged around Velther's ship as he spoke. Human fighters were being shot down, their pilots dying to protect the evacuation transports. The coalition forces were pushing closer to Earth, their weapons charging for planetary bombardment. I am watching humans die right now, Velther said, his voice filled with emotion. They are sacrificing themselves to save their families, their children, their future. They are showing the same compassion that Jake Morrison showed me. They are proving that his kindness was not unique, but part of something greater. Across the galaxy, Cathara listened to their commander's words. They had always known Velther as a wise and honorable leader. If he said that humans were worth saving, then perhaps they were. I will not abandon them, Velther declared. I will not let Jake Morrison's people die while I have the power to save them. Our ancestors taught us that compassion is the highest virtue. Today, I choose to honor that teaching. The transmission ended, but its impact was immediate. On Cathara Prime, the council chambers erupted in debate. Some members were angry that Velther had defied their orders. Others were moved by his story and his passion. Throughout the galaxy, individual Cathara began to make their own choices. Ship commanders, colony leaders, and military officers started to question their neutrality. If their most respected leader was willing to risk everything to save humanity, perhaps they should too. But the immediate battle was still being lost. The coalition forces had broken through the human defensive line and were approaching Earth's atmosphere. Their massive ships began to target the planet's cities, preparing to destroy the human homeworld. Velther's ship was badly damaged, its shields failing. Around him, human ships continued to fight even when they were outnumbered and outgunned. He saw a young human pilot ram her damaged fighter into a coalition bomber, preventing it from reaching the planet below. "Sir, we're getting massive energy readings from the jump points," reported his communications officer suddenly. "Ships are incoming." Velther looked at his tactical display and felt his heart soar. Dozens of Cathara ships were arriving in the Sol system, then hundreds, then thousands. The Cathara Collective's entire fleet was coming through the jump points, their weapons charged and ready for battle. Zauralin's voice came over the communication system. "Velther, you magnificent fool. Did you really think we would let you face this alone?" Council Elder Mordain's ancient voice followed. "The Council has voted. We stand with humanity. We stand with you." The arrival of the Cathara fleet changed everything. The coalition forces, who had been moments away from victory, suddenly found themselves facing the most advanced military force in the galaxy. The Cathara ships moved with perfect coordination, their weapons cutting through the enemy fleet like a blade through silk. Admiral Walker watched in amazement as the battle turned in their favor. The coalition ships, which had seemed so powerful moments before, were being destroyed by the dozens. The Cathara fleet was not just winning, they were dominating. "All human ships, this is Admiral Walker," he broadcast to his fleet. "Let's show our allies what we're made of. Attack!" The combined human and Kithara forces struck the coalition fleet with overwhelming power. The enemy ships, caught between the planet's defenses and the incoming Kithara fleet, began to retreat. Their commanders had not planned for this possibility. Captain Rodriguez led her fighters alongside a group of Kithara pilots, hunting down the retreating coalition forces. She had never experienced anything like this battle. The fear and desperation of moments before had been replaced by hope and determination. "This is incredible," she radioed to her squadron. "We're actually winning." But Velther knew that this was just the beginning. The coalition had forces throughout the galaxy, and they would not give up easily. The war that had started with humanity's near extinction was now a conflict between two philosophies: the coalition's belief in domination and the Kithara's faith. In Compassion Dot, as the last coalition ships fled the Sol system, Velther opened a channel to the human fleet. "Admiral Walker, this is Commander Velther. Earth is safe, but the war is far from over. We have much work to do." Walker's voice was filled with gratitude. "Commander, we owe you a debt we can never repay. Your people saved us when we had no hope left." Velther thought of Jake Morrison, probably watching the news reports from his small house on Earth. The old man would never know that his simple act of kindness had changed the course of galactic history. "Admiral," Velther replied, "sometimes the greatest debts are the ones we never know we owe." The news of the Kithara's intervention at Earth spread across the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time in galactic history, the peaceful Kithara had chosen to fight, and they had chosen to fight for humanity. The footage of Kithara ships defending human civilians was broadcast on every news network in known space. Alien species that had remained neutral began to question their positions. If the wise and ancient Kithara believed humanity was worth saving, perhaps they were wrong to stand aside. Within days, 3 more species declared their support for humanity. The Zenari, who had been neutral for centuries, sent their healing ships to help wounded humans. The Vorthan Mining Guild offered their industrial might to rebuild destroyed colonies. The Akkadian traders opened their supply networks to human refugees, but the most significant change was happening within the Kithara themselves. Velther's story about Jake Morrison had touched something deep in their collective consciousness. They began to see humanity not as aggressive conquerors, but as a young species capable of both great cruelty and incredible kindness. The war that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The coalition forces, which had seemed unstoppable just weeks before, found themselves fighting a growing alliance of species united by a simple idea. That compassion was stronger than conquest. Admiral Walker and Commander Velther worked together to coordinate the Allied forces. Their partnership became legendary, a symbol of what different species could accomplish when they trusted each other. The humans' tactical creativity, combined with the Kithara's advanced technology, proved devastating. To coalition forces, Captain Rodriguez, now promoted to Admiral, led joint human Kithara squadrons in battles across the galaxy. She had learned to work seamlessly with her alien allies, and they had learned to appreciate human courage and determination. The turning point came at the Battle of Rigel Station, where the coalition made their last major stand. The enemy had gathered their remaining forces into a massive fleet, hoping to win through sheer numbers. But the Allied forces had something the coalition lacked: unity of purpose. Velther watched the battle from his command ship, fighting alongside humans who reminded him more and more of Jake Morrison. They were willing to sacrifice everything for their friends, their families, and their beliefs. They showed the same compassion that had saved his life so many years ago. When the coalition fleet finally broke and scattered, the war was effectively over. The surviving coalition forces fled to the outer rim of the galaxy, defeated and demoralized. The Alliance had won, But more importantly, they had proven that different species could work together in peace. The aftermath of the war brought changes that reshaped galactic civilization. The old system of isolated species competing for resources was replaced by a new order based on cooperation and mutual respect. Trade increased, technology was shared, and conflicts were resolved through diplomacy rather than warfare. But for Velther, the most important moment came when he finally traveled to Earth to meet the human who had started it all. Jake Morrison was now 70 years old, living quietly in his small house with his granddaughter Lucy, who was now 10 years old. Velther arrived at Jake's home in a simple transport, wearing civilian clothes rather than his military uniform. He wanted this meeting to be personal, not official. When he knocked on the door, Jake answered with the same kind eyes that Velther remembered from 23 years ago. "Can I help you?" Jake asked, not recognizing the well-dressed alien at his door. "Hello, Jake," Velther said softly. "I don't know if you remember me. My name is Velther. You saved my life many years ago on Colony Station Zeta-7. Jake's eyes widened in recognition. The alien was different now, healthier and more confident. But Jake could see the same being he had nursed back to health in his quarters. "Velther? Is that really you?" "It is me," Velther replied, pulling out the small metal tool Jake had given him as a farewell gift. "I told you I would never forget your kindness." Jake invited Velther into his home, and they sat in the small living room, where Lucy was playing with her toys. The little girl looked up at their alien visitor with curiosity, but no fear. In the new galaxy that Jake and Velther had helped create, seeing different species together was becoming normal. "I've been watching the news," Jake said quietly. "All this talk about humans and aliens working together, the war that just ended. I never imagined anything like it was possible." Velther smiled. "Jake, I need to tell you something that you may find hard to believe. That war, that alliance, all of it happened because of what you did for me 23 years ago." Jake looked confused. "I don't understand. I just helped an injured person. Anyone would have done the same thing." "That's where you're wrong," Velther said gently. "Most beings would not have risked their safety for a stranger. Most beings would have walked away. But you didn't. You showed me that humans were capable of incredible compassion, and I spent the next 23 years trying to honor that lesson." Velther told Jake the whole story. How he had risen to become a council member and used his influence to help humanity. How he had defied his own government to defend Earth. How his broadcast during the battle had convinced the Kithara to join the war. How Jake's simple act of kindness had ultimately saved his entire species. Jake listened in amazement, sometimes shaking his head in disbelief. "You mean all those people who lived, all those worlds that were saved, that happened because I helped you?" "It happened because you showed me what humans could be at their best," Velther replied. "You planted a seed of compassion that grew into something that changed the galaxy." Lucy looked up from her toys. "Grandpa, you're a hero," she said with the simple clarity that only children possess. Jake laughed and ruffled his granddaughter's hair. "I'm just a maintenance worker who did what felt right. Sometimes that's all it takes to change everything," Velther said. In the months that followed, Jake's story became known throughout the galaxy. The human who had unknowingly saved his species became a symbol of the power of individual kindness. Schools taught about his example. Diplomats quoted his story in peace negotiations. Children of a dozen different species learned that one person's compassion could ripple outward to affect countless lives. The formal alliance between humanity and the Kithara was signed 6 months later. The Terran-Kithara Mutual Defense Pact stated that any threat to one species would be considered a threat to both. More importantly, it established the principle that all sentient beings deserve protection and respect, regardless of their species or origin. Jake was invited to the signing ceremony, but he declined. He preferred to watch the historic event on his television at home, surrounded by his family. As he watched human and alien leaders shake hands and sign documents that would shape the future of the galaxy, Jake felt a quiet satisfaction. The ceremony was held on a space station orbiting Earth. Representatives from dozens of species attended, all of them united by the idea that cooperation was better than conflict. Admiral Walker and Commander Velther spoke about the importance of understanding between different peoples, but the most moving moment came when Velther held up the small metal tool that Jake had given him years ago. This simple wrench represents something that all of our species need to remember, he told the assembled delegates. Sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is not a weapon or a fleet of ships. Sometimes it's just one person choosing to help another. The new galactic order that emerged from the war was built on Jake's principle that kindness should flow freely between all beings. Trade networks connected distant worlds. Scientific discoveries were shared among species. Cultural exchanges brought different civilizations closer together. Jake lived to see his granddaughter, Lucy, become one of the first humans to serve alongside aliens in the Joint Exploration Fleet. She grew up in a galaxy where cooperation was normal, where different species worked together as friends rather than competitors. When Jake passed away peacefully at the age of 85, representatives from 47 different species attended. His funeral, the simple maintenance worker, had become one of the most honored figures in galactic history, not for what he accomplished, but for what he inspired in others. Velther spoke at the service, his voice carrying across the crowd of humans and aliens who had come to pay their respects. Jake Morrison never sought glory or recognition. He never wanted to change the galaxy. He simply saw someone who needed help, and he helped. In doing so, he showed us all what we could become. The Jake Morrison Foundation was established after his death, dedicated to promoting understanding and cooperation between different species. It funded schools, hospitals, and research stations throughout the galaxy. Every year, they gave awards to individuals who showed exceptional kindness to those different from themselves. Years later, Lucy Morrison commanded her own exploration ship, continuing her grandfather's legacy of building bridges between different peoples. She carried with her a photo of Jake and Velther, taken during their reunion, two old friends who had changed the course of history through a simple act of compassion. The galaxy had learned an important lesson from Jake Morrison's example. Kindness was not weakness. Compassion was not foolishness. Sometimes the smallest gestures could have the greatest impact. So,